2 months? I think it was only 2 months ago. I was texting with Ben Allen, and because Ben Allen is a very special senator. You know, there are senators who only represent their own little districts, but there are senators who represent all of us. And sometimes when I really feel something in my heart and I feel it has to get dealt with, I love my state senator, Henry Stern. He's wonderful, but I gotta call Ben. And I know I'm gonna get a text back right away. So I was texting with Ben, and we're about PD America. And I said, Alan's the new executive director, and we're all so excited, but we don't have any money. And Ben said, well, let's do something about that. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, let's have a fundraiser. So you're all here because of a text I did with Ben Allen. PDA was so grateful. And I know a lot of you are here because Ben sent an email out to his list, as well as we sent emails to our list. But how many people are here because they got an email from Ben? You don't want to raise your hand? I know a lot of you are. I want to ask another question. How many of you saw a Facebook ad about this event? Anybody? All right. Well, that's interesting because we have been doing these little Facebook ads. So thanks to my friend Chris at our club, and we had some phone calls made. But I give Ben Allen the credit for this event because this event would not be happening if it wasn't for Ben Allen. And even if you didn't hear from Ben Allen, you saw his name on the invitation, and you knew you had to come out, and you wanted to see Ben as much as you wanted to see PDA. So I am so proud to call him a friend. I hope that's okay. I met Ben when he first started running for office. Our club endorsed him, and we stuck by our endorsements through thick and thin. It was a rough ride for a while, but I think that all of LA and all of California is very glad to have Ben Allen in the Senate. So welcome, Ben. Thank you for coming to PDA.
Well, thank you, Dorothy, and I love you, Dorothy. Appreciate this. This is really fun to get everyone together. And obviously, big thanks to Jan and Jerry for always opening their house to such incredibly righteous causes. I mean, this is just the latest of so many wonderful events. And just a couple weeks ago, we were Damien was presenting his film, working on trying to draw some exposure to the excesses of the fossil fuel industry and how they're impacting a lot of disadvantaged communities. But that's just one of many events that happen here. So I just appreciate being here. And I also want to say how incredible it is to have such a great turnout, especially given the fact that we're in the middle of a presidentially declared national emergency. You know, you're so brave to have come out during this dark moment of national emergency to San Vicente, these dangerous streets, to just be here and form some community. I want to talk about, just for a moment, about why PDA is so important to me and why I think we just kind of give you a lens to consider the importance of this organization. Let me just start by saying that I serve in the legislature. We have a kind of wonderful Democratic majority right now in the legislature in Sacramento. And of course, one of the great things about our state is that when we make policy, it really does have global reverberations, partly because of the size, the might of the California economy. On our own, we're now the 5th largest economy in the world. And so when we, there we go, hand over us, mainly because of Brexit, so I guess it serves them right. But you know, it's interesting because back when the 1970s, when the average Angelino kid was growing up with half of the lung capacity of kids growing up in rural parts of the country because of the terrible air quality, when progressive Democrats stood up and said we needed to have much stronger environmental protections in place, we need to have smog curbs and emissions reduction, everyone said, well, our economy is going to be run into the ground, nobody will be able to get around, it's going to be terrible, nobody's going to want to come here. And of course, if anything, it's only cleaned up and more people want to come here. We've been victims of our own success. And that story's happened over and over and over and over again. And it's so important to have people within our governmental structure working hand in hand with activists to stand up for those kinds of protections of public health and our public environment. And I want to focus in on the environment because I do think it's an area where it's something that actually everyone says they care about, right? I mean, you look at the president. Even the president says, "Oh, we're going to have a beautiful environment. Everything's going to be fine." Nobody can get up there and say that they really do want to make the environment dirty. They want to roll back progress, and yet it ends up becoming an area where sometimes you see fissures, certainly between Democrats and Republicans, but also within the Democratic Party. I serve now as the chairman of the Environmental Quality Committee, and this is the committee that oversees everything from toxins regulation to green chemistry issues, our greenhouse gas reduction program, and also at the same time our pollution, waste, and plastics, and all those kinds of issues. When we took the bold stand to really try to get a handle on our emissions problem, so as to be able to show the rest of the world that we can grow an economy and reduce our carbon footprint at the same time and do it successfully. Because if we're going to save our planet, we have to be able to show that. There were a lot of folks out there, including folks within our party, who just thought that was going one step too far, that this was going to ruin the California economy, that we weren't going to be able to meet our obligations to the future, both environmentally and economically. Interestingly enough, we've both met the AB 32 goals. We're far on track toward the SB 32 goals, and the economy has grown. We actually have a significantly lower unemployment rate than the rest of the country. And that is not in spite of, but perhaps because of our strong environmental policies, because people want to be here, because they want to be part of this cleaner place that we call home. But we're not anywhere near as clean as we ought to be. I mean, you look at the water quality problems that exist in a lot of areas of our state. You look at the air pollution problems that continue to plague Los Angeles on bad days, but also continually plague our friends in the Central Valley, who do not have elected officials for the most part, at least historically, have not had elected officials who've looked out for air quality there, both Democrats and Republicans. Finally, that's starting to change, partly because of the hard work of everybody here and the folks going out and knocking on doors, and also just the fact that folks are starting to, I think, see the Republican Party for what it is, which is, at least on the area of the environment, just a total sham. I mean, a party that has kind of gone out of its way to side with big interests over people's health. And yet, even when it comes to the conversations within the Democratic Party, it's hard sometimes. It's far harder than it should be. In spite of this big majority that we have in the legislature, it's far harder to pass the kind of progressive environmental legislation that we ought to pass, even though this is legislation that is incredibly popular, that's popular with folks on both sides of the aisle. And at least citizens, residents, folks outside of Sacramento, outside of the Capitol, it's popular. But the fact of the matter is, so many of our colleagues, unfortunately, end up raising a lot of their money from special interests, and they end up becoming too beholden to those special interests. You talked about lobbyists, right? We talk about the power of lobbyists. Well, there's a ton of lobbyists up in Sacramento, and in fact, there's some beautiful buildings surrounding the Capitol that have been entirely funded by lobbying interests, and that money is being spent to influence the political process and to effectively get good folks who run for office for good reasons to suddenly find doubt in good progressive policy making. Well, if you just do this, if you just pass this smog control, this is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back on the automobile industry. This is what's going to hurt poor folks because they're no longer going to be able to afford gasoline. If we just take that extra step to reduce plastic pollution that's choking our waterways and destroying our ocean, and by the way, costing local government $420 million annual every year just in litter cleanup alone. And that doesn't even get into the plastic, the waste management challenges that all the cities are facing. And I want to say hello to my good friend Sue Himmelrich from our city council here in Santa Monica, a great progressive champion. Santa Monica has been doing the right thing in this area, but they know how difficult this current situation is. We've got a bill right now before the legislature that seeks to dramatically reduce single-use waste, to dramatically up the use of recycled and recyclable, and compostable and reusable products. And when I say recyclable, I don't just mean recyclable in a lab, but will actually get recycled in real life. One of the depressing things, guys, is that you would be so shocked if you knew how much of what you're throwing into your blue bins is actually getting recycled and turning into something useful at the end of the day. China doesn't want our waste anymore. Okay, they've declared this program called National Sword, where they've really brought the sword down on our waste, which we used to send off to them to sort out and then turn into recycled content. A lot of stuff is now showing up in Southeast Asia. My friends from Malaysia, some of it's showing up in Malaysia. I was literally at an event, we were presenting our bill on plastics reduction just the other day, and we had someone from the Story of Stuff who had just come back from Indonesia, where he was walking around in a big, kind of just out on the beach, and the beach was covered in American trash. He was picking up AARP cards and flyers from Mount Vernon, just on the beach in Indonesia. Okay, how did it get there? It was shipped there. It was put into recycling bins. The Chinese said, we don't want this because it's contaminated. The Amazon, plastic packages are getting to the point where they're screwing up the paper quality of the bales, and so then it gets sent down there, and then it's incinerated or thrown on the ground. I mean, we'd be better off just landfilling it here. So these are things that we have to get our handle on, and we need to start taking bold action on. And we need Democrats who are willing to see the value, both to our environment and to people of color and low-income communities, the impact that environmental injustice has on those communities. We need to also get to a place where we can see how much cost this is putting on our communities and on our taxpayers. Because in the end of the day, that's where our future is. And yet, the Capitol's filled with people who represent the parochial interests that happen to just be trying to get a couple extra 5 more years of producing that extra product, or who walk the halls saying, well, we don't need to be this aggressive. Just hold down a little bit, slow down. And this happens on issue after issue after issue when it comes to the environment. And it's how bills get watered down. It's how things end up being a little less bold than they ought to be. What PDA does is it shines a light on the decision-making process in power. It also provides cover to some of our Democratic friends who actually genuinely want to do the right thing, but they're afraid. They're afraid because the power structure tells them that they have to behave a certain way, and they don't think that folks aren't going to have their back when it comes to getting reelected. They don't feel as though there's going to be enough of an infrastructure in place for them to support them politically back home. And so part of what we have to do is play a 50-state strategy, but also a 58-county strategy here in the state of California, where we spend time educating and engaging with folks in other parts of the state, where a lot of people are very disadvantaged, but they don't, sometimes their disadvantage gets wrapped up into weird culture wars and leads them to spend too much time listening to Rush Limbaugh and voting for, all sorts of awful folks. And really coming and working with them, hearing their stories, listening to them, not trying to explain things to them, but engage with them and work with them, and ultimately help to build a greater environment whereby my colleagues can feel good and feel safe and secure and strong in voting for good progressive democratic values. And that's what PDA helps to do.
Could you reflect the numbers, financial, and what does Europe do?
What is what?
Europe does for its waste.
Oh, so what is the cost of?
Yes, the plastic and all that waste that we create.
Yeah, I should get some data. I know you're taping, so let's set up a meeting and let's talk data about that. We'll get some good data for you on that. But Europe is much better than we are on waste usage, on single-use issues in general, and they've got some really great organizations that work in this space. I don't want to get too deep down a rabbit hole. I mean, the point I was trying to make here is that what PDA helps to do is create an environment for folks to feel strong and secure in voting their progressive values. We have good people in the legislature for the most part, and yet we need more. We need those that have lost their way. I mean, there really are some. It is ridiculous. And we had a guy who represented Westwood who tried to form an oil caucus. I mean, just unbelievable. I mean, it just doesn't make sense, right? But so we need to make sure we're shining light on those folks and making sure that they understand, the consequences of what they're doing. They feel a little bit of heat for doing things that are outside of the values of our party. But we also, at the same time, need to help to hold up and support and give strength to folks who want to do the right thing. So that's what you're doing here today. That's part of what you're helping to support these kinds of efforts all over the country. It's a wonderful, important, righteous cause. And I just want to stand in solidarity with you. I want to say thank you for being a part of this. Thank you to Susie and to Susan and to Dorothy and so many. Jan and Jeremy, there are just so many wonderful, wonderful activists who've fought for so long to make things better in our country. And this is what this effort's all about. Thank you for being a part of it. Thank you, everybody.